I'm David Mendoza. I'm 22 years old, and over the course of the past 1,000 days, I've endured an incredible journey. Here's my story. I was on my way to school one morning at 7 a.m. or so, and although I don't remember it, I was struck from the side, thrown 75 feet. I broke both my legs, both my ankles. I fractured my hip, dislocated my shoulder, broke my wrist, displaced my kidney, tore my bladder, had a spine fracture, and was inhaling my own blood and almost had pneumonia. I was thrown 75 feet, and where I landed, I was lucky enough to be spotted by a police officer who just happened to be in the area, and he called an ambulance for me. When I first woke up in the hospital, 3 days after my accident, they had already done a few surgeries on me. I wasn't angry, I wasn't or upset, but there was a small fear that because the details of my accident were still unknown to me, I didn't know what I had broken, I didn't know what was my condition, so there was a small fear that I wouldn't be able to walk again. So, but I put all my attention on my body, you know, I managed to twitch a little bit. I remember I managed to move my hip and my legs very slightly, so that to me was enough to believe that I would walk again. The first few nights were incredibly painful. They had to put cold sheets all over my body to cool me down, to get my heart rate down. And the nights just seemed like an eternity of pain. I remember I would look at the clock and it would seem like hours would pass, but really it was only a few minutes. In the night, to get through it all, I'd close my eyes and I would just tell myself, this pain is nothing, over and over and over until I believed it. It was very, very painful, but I had the tools to endure that experience. You know, I had trained myself to an insane degree, and I had learned to keep my mind calm. The deep breathing definitely helped keep my heart rate down, which was a major issue at the time. And just dealing with the pain, learning how to put all of my focus and attention on other ideas and thoughts other than you know, the pain that I was feeling. As soon as I got home, it was such a relief to be home. A nurse would come every so often to change my bandages. I would have to get injected a blood thinner to keep the blood moving because I wasn't doing that much movement. But I still knew what I had to do. Like I told my sister to buy me a stretch band, and even in that state, you know, I would still do little like stretches. I would still do like chest contractions, shoulder contractions. I would contract my thighs and my calves. I would ask my sister to put her palm on my foot so I can squeeze my calf muscle, because I knew how important it was to keep blood moving. The first few months of my recovery were the most difficult. I was heavily bedridden. My sister would have to use this crane to lift me off the bed. I was in a harness, and she would raise me from the bed onto a wheelchair. And from there, I would sit on like 5 pillows, and my legs were completely locked straight. For therapy, I would just work on just sitting on the wheelchair for 3 times a day for 10 minutes was my first form of therapy, and even that was incredibly difficult. I felt very lightheaded. It was very difficult. I would make it a habit to try to work on bending my legs, and I remember like every inch that I got was such a major accomplishment because they were so stiff. I said, even if it takes me 10 years to recover, that I would still run again, which is my main goal at the time, to run. For the past 2 years, I had ran so much, and it was such a liberating feeling to be able to run 30 miles a week. very happy to be in physical therapy because I needed the help. And when I came in, I was on my wheelchair. My mom was pushing me. I couldn't push the wheelchair on my own at the time. And that's when I met my physical therapist. And I found it very funny because, as she opened the clipboard or her folder, I knew what she was gonna see was something, definitely not common. So many broken injuries. So her expression was definitely priceless, and I remember just laughing. I was there with my cast on both legs, my arm in a cast, my other arm like in a sling, and I was just laughing so hard at her reaction. My physical therapist challenged me to stand to see if I could, and she didn't think that I could do it. I got up, like, even though it was so painful, but I managed to stand up. I had enough strength to stand at that moment, and I definitely I surprised her. When I first began therapy, the main goal was to re-stimulate my muscles, to have them be strong enough to handle my weight again, to stand. And the exercises that we did in the beginning was just hooking my legs up to an electro stem machine, which stimulated my legs muscles to contract. And that's mainly what I did for the first couple months. It was such an experience to go from the pinnacle of where I was, of strength and speed and of health. It felt amazing to be there. I felt like I could do anything at that point. And then all of a sudden, overnight, being brought down so low. Being able to stand led to being able to take one step, then another. My physical therapist would have to wrap a belt around my waist, and she would hold on to me and make sure I didn't fall. And that's just how it started, one step at a time. My motivation to keep going was, just remembering the feeling that I felt when I would run so often. I would just feel so light on my feet, and that feeling is just indescribable. And I knew I had to get back to that. I just did everything that I was told, and much more. I would do, if they told me to do 10, I would do 100. A good analogy is just that I was running out of hell, it seemed, just my feet were burning, and I just kept running and running because there's no choice but to run. Going to one of my many appointments, I got an x-ray done on my legs and all my other fractures. And the doctor noticed that my right leg hadn't been healing. Both my legs had been broken, and what they did was metal rods were inserted through my knee up to my thigh to align the bone to help it to heal. And my right leg wasn't healing. So despite all of the work that I was doing in physical therapy, I found out that I was gonna have to have another surgery. That, to me, right away, when I heard that, brought another a tear to my eye. It was a step back, definitely. My goal now was to get on crutches, learn to walk with just one crutch, and ultimately walk without any crutches. There's really no secret to the recovery process. It's just eating what you have to eat for the day and doing the exercises that you have to do, and being content with seeing minute progress all throughout. And that's just what I did. If one day I was able to move my leg in a certain way that I wasn't able to before, that was a very motivating thing to see. After physical therapy, I had to work to get back to where I was. I had weights in my house, and I knew what I had to do. It's not a complicated process, but I put in the work every single day. 6 days a week, I had a routine, and I would call it my deadly routine, because it was it would leave me like in bed, like exhausted. I had just begun to walk and I would attempt to squat. I remember I would have the 45-pound bar on my back, and although I could only bend my legs like 15 degrees, like I would do that for like 1,000 times until the next week where I could go a little bit lower and go for a little bit more. I never missed a day. Like, how easy is it for me not to do that one last, like, little exercise? But every week I made sure to do it. Every week, no matter what. I never not did what I knew I could do. Despite having my ankles hurting the way that they did, my legs, I still forced myself to run. I remember I would make it a habit every Saturday morning to run 12 laps around this elementary school around my house. And so difficult, but I still did it. Like, my body was allowed me to do it. Like, it was painful, but it was possible. There came a day where I felt like I was now stronger than I was before. I'm able to squat like 300 pounds with these broken legs, ankles, all these injuries that I listed, my hip being fractured, my shoulder being dislocated, my wrist being broken. Despite all that, I've done something, incredible, I would think, right? And I just hope that with what I've done these past 1,000 days, I've, elevated in some people's minds what can be possible. Two weeks before my accident, I had an unbelievable experience that, I want to share because it's so deeply connected to the mentality that I had throughout my recovery. I went into a dream, and in it, I had an interesting experience. I felt a star explode before me, and I heard a voice that said, "I am creation," which felt like it was my own also. And as I felt that star explode before me, I became awake again. I was awake in my bed, but the sensations from that explosion caused the right hemisphere of my brain to begin to vibrate, and I began to hear sounds in my mind apart from my own thoughts. I began to hear words, an endless stream of words speaking to me of my existence and purpose for being. And I'll never forget what I heard. A few words I heard were, I heard galaxy, light, and you may not be able to understand fully at this moment. And from there, it seemed like the next 2 weeks were a blur, and I was waking up in the hospital with the memories. Throughout my whole recovery, that's been on my mind. Those are the memories that I had. And, I don't understand why all of this had to happen, but like my experience leads me to believe maybe I don't understand at this moment, but one day I will, and that one day will be pretty incredible.